Tonight, new developments after the sudden death of a top Senate Republican close to President Trump. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham dead at 71, with his office late tonight sharing new information on what happened. Emergency responders rushing to his home after a call for cardiac arrest. Why the FBI says it's now helping in the investigation. Plus, the brand new photo just into us of Senator Mitch McConnell, who says he's now at a rehab center. And the first statement from him in the weeks since his hospitalization. Breaking news tonight, the new wave of U.S. strikes against Iran happening now, with the president ordering attacks after Iran hit a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. We're live in the region. Deadly pub fire, dramatic new images showing flames shooting out this door overseas. Dozens now killed. The terrifying moment, a bison charges and hits a man at Yellowstone National Park, launching him into the air. How he's doing tonight and what the photographer who captured these images is telling us. Dangerous storms leaving a trail of destruction, ripping off roofs, trees, smashing into cars. Plus, the massive heat dome back to blanket most of the country. Protesters demanding answers as questions grow after a teen's death during a 4th of July trip with friends. Mystery parasite, the race to find the source of an outbreak exploding in size. Plus, the popular museum linked to a different disease outbreak in New York City. Remarkable rescue, the moment a dog, trapped and missing for days, is reunited with his owner. The world #1 goes back-to-back at Wimbledon. And there's good news tonight about hard work paying off, helping this boy's World Cup dreams come true.
This is NBC Nightly News with Hallie Jackson.
Good evening. We begin tonight with the stunning and sudden death of a longtime top Republican, with new details late tonight from the office of Senator Lindsey Graham, who died overnight at the age of 71. You see here emergency responders at Graham's home answering calls of a cardiac arrest. His office now says early findings indicate Graham had a tear in his aorta. Graham had just returned from an overseas trip to Ukraine, and President Trump, who counted Graham among his closest allies, tells NBC News he talked with the senator on the phone not long before his death. For decades, Senator Graham has been widely considered one of the more influential Republicans in Washington. It comes as we're also getting an update tonight on the health of a different Republican senator, Mitch McConnell, releasing this photo right here for the first time since his hospitalization weeks ago, saying he went briefly unconscious after a fall and that he will delay his return to the Senate for now. We have team coverage tonight, starting with Julie Sirkin here in Washington.
One of the most influential lawmakers in history, South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, dead tonight at 71 years old, passing away suddenly after suffering chest pains in his Capitol Hill home last night.
EMS 6 responded to Angel 7 Medic 7 with cardiac arrest.
Emergency personnel responding just before 9 p.m. to calls of cardiac arrest. New preliminary findings from the D.C. medical examiner shared by the senator's office say the main artery in his body tore, a sign of heart disease. His family is asking for privacy during this incredibly difficult period. FBI Director Kash Patel said his agency is assisting authorities in investigating Graham's shocking death. President Trump sharing his final conversation with Graham on Meet the Press this morning.
What makes it even stranger is that I got a call last night sometime in, the early evening. He sounded a little tired, but perfect. But thought maybe we might even meet today. And then that was it.
Graham, a former military lawyer and lifelong foreign policy hawk, had just returned from Ukraine, where on his 71st birthday he spent time with President Zelensky in what would be his final public appearance. The four-term senator, who worked just as well across the aisle as he did with his own side, announcing in Kyiv the White House finally signed off on a bipartisan bill that would make it more difficult for Russian President Putin to fund his war.
I've never been more optimistic than I am today that we have the formula to end this war.
Graham built lasting friendships with lawmakers, presidents, and world leaders from all backgrounds.
I think America has lost a great patriot.
But no relationship as enduring as his bond with the late Senator John McCain, who he traveled the world with and frequently defended.
John McCain was willing to die for this country, and he can vote any way he wants to.
Trump today referring to Graham as family, but the 2016 presidential campaign rivals haven't always seen eye to eye.
And as to Donald Trump, he would be a terrible commander-in-chief.
In 2021, Graham slammed Trump hours after the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
Count me out. Enough is enough. I've tried to be helpful.
Now it's hard to find a Republican lawmaker with more influence over Trump than Graham.
The friendship grew. It just grew. And he was an amazing advocate.
Hallie, the senator's cause of death is pending. The D.C. medical examiner says Graham, whose father died from heart disease, had chronic plaque buildup in his arteries, making them prone to tearing. But his manner of death, Hallie, will not be known until the toxicology report comes back, something the FBI could help process. Agents were actually at his home today. Hallie?
Julie Sirkin, thank you. Let's turn now to our chief Capitol Hill correspondent, Ryan Nobles, who is joining us here in Washington. And Ryan, a lot of folks would tell you there will not be another senator quite like Lindsey Graham. What does the process now look like moving forward?
Yeah, I think you're right about that, Hallie. There's no doubt that Lindsey Graham not only had a direct line to President Trump, but his long career in Congress gave him a special institutional understanding of the way Washington works. His influence in the foreign policy space will be the most recognized. He was a leading GOP proponent of defense of Ukraine and Israel. It's a position on the right that is losing influence. As for this vacant seat, South Carolina's governor will appoint a replacement until the end of the year, but there will also be a snap primary to fill his space on the midterm ballot.
And then, Ryan, what about some of these new developments on Senator Mitch McConnell? We are hearing from him now directly for the first time since his hospitalization last month.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Hallie. This is the first time we're hearing directly from the 84-year-old senator himself. He's been in the hospital for close to a month. He said in a statement that he did not suffer a heart attack or a stroke, but instead lost consciousness after a fall, adding, quote, "I didn't break any bones or suffer a concussion, but I was briefly unconscious." That led to his hospitalization. He added that he was recently able to move to a rehab facility where he continues to regain his strength. Now, while McConnell says that he's been able to keep up with Senate business, he hasn't been able to make it to the floor. And without that key GOP vote, it's far more difficult for Republicans to confirm key cabinet posts and judicial nominations, much less any significant legislation, Hallie.
Yeah, a lot to watch on your beat. Ryan Nobles, thank you. We've got some more breaking news tonight. A new escalation in the Middle East with U.S. strikes happening as we speak inside Iran. The U.S. says it's in response to Iranian attacks against commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Our Raf Sanchez has those late-breaking details.
As the U.S. and Iran trade waves of attacks, tonight a new escalation. Central Command announcing a fresh round of strikes aimed at stopping Iran from targeting commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz, amid conflicting claims about the status of the critical waterway. The U.S. earlier said it struck 140 targets on Iran's southern coast, using drones, fighter jets, and cruise missiles launched from warships. President Trump telling Meet the Press,
"We bombed the hell out of them last night. They're very, very evil and sick people."
It comes after Iran announced on state television that it attacked and crippled a commercial cargo ship in the Strait for using an unauthorized route. Tonight, one of its crew members is still missing. But despite the intensive U.S. bombardment, Iran showing no sign of backing down. The Revolutionary Guard launching attacks of its own against U.S. allies across the Gulf, declaring the Strait of Hormuz is shut and will remain closed until the end of U.S. interference in the region. Central Command insisting the strait is open for transit, but it's unclear if ship captains will risk running what is now a gauntlet of fire. Maritime data shows just 21 ships transited yesterday, still just a fraction of the pre-war average of around 110 ships a day. Iran says it will control the future of the strait along with neighboring Oman, a demand the U.S. says is unacceptable. Pakistani officials who brokered last month's memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran tonight appealing for calm, as the Middle East appears to be spiraling back into full-blown conflict.
Raf is joining us now live from Jerusalem. Raf, what else are we learning about this latest wave now of U.S. strikes?
So, Hallie, Central Command says these strikes were launched after Iranian forces once again opened fire on commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. They say U.S. warplanes have so far shot down an Iranian cruise missile and a one-way attack drone, but there could be more to come. Hallie.
Raf Sanchez, thank you. Here at home, new and devastating damage from intense storms ripping across the country, with mudslides from flooding in the south and yet another wave of potentially dangerous extreme heat on the way. Valerie Castro is tracking that.
Tonight, damaging storms leaving a trail of destruction.
Oh, my God!
With more severe weather on the way.
Oh, my God, the car!
Philadelphia hard hit by at least 4 severe microbursts Saturday.
It's definitely not normal.
With straight-line wind gusts of up to 70 miles per hour, according to the National Weather Service. The storms ripping the roof off an apartment building.
I heard a giant boom, and I'm like, did we get hit by lightning? And then I looked out the front door and saw the roof was on top of my vehicle.
Another building partially collapsing, scattering bricks. Trees toppled onto roads, smashing cars. One tree landing on electrical wires, seen smoking in the aftermath.
It's like a thunder, a thump, just a roar, like a whoosh.
The mayor issuing a declaration of disaster emergency after thousands were left without power. In Tennessee, flash flooding sweeping through the eastern part of the state, triggering mudslides. And in Louisiana, parts of the New Orleans area left soaked with inundated cars. Missouri still cleaning up from deadly flash flooding that also prompted the evacuation of a summer camp. In Lesterville, several vehicles left abandoned in mud and some trapped by the rising water. Trailers seen toppled over along the riverbank. As more rain is expected to batter parts of the South, most of the country also bracing for extreme heat.
Valerie is joining us now from Central Park. And Valerie, this next heat wave could set records in some spots.
Yeah, Hallie, and a heat dome is setting up over most of the country, with many expecting to see highs in the 90s and triple digits over the next several days. Right now, more than 48 million people are under heat alerts, and tonight, flood advisories are also in place. Flash flooding remains a concern for some 12 million people in Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. Hallie.
Valerie Castro, thank you. Also tonight, some scary new images of the terrifying moments at one of the country's most iconic national parks. A massive, angry bison charging a man and launching him into the air. Here's Camila Bernal.
Everyone's bison! Look out, bison! Look out!
This was the terrifying scene at Yellowstone National Park. A bison charging toward a man and a young person. Moments before, the two taking photos from a distance as it lays down, when the animal gets up and bolts in their direction. They try to run and hide as the bison chases the man around a tree, shakes another one. And then the bison slams into that man with brutal force, throwing him feet into the air.
It was like watching a bulldozer move out at 45 miles an hour.
Photographer Mike McCloud recorded that video, but stopped and ran to help.
And when you approach this man, how is he?
He was in a lot of pain. He was conscious, I think, the entire time.
The National Park Service confirming a 65-year-old man was injured by a bison and taken to the hospital. McCloud says he's in touch with the man's family.
It sounds like he has a broken leg in several places. The doctor said that he probably would recover, but it's going to be a long recovery.
The man's family telling NBC News he underwent surgery and remains at the hospital. This incident, the second in just 2 months at the park. In June, a 12-year-old was also hurt by a bison. The National Park Service says people should always stay more than 25 yards away from them and to run away if one charges.
Look out, bison! Look out!
A frightening incident at one of America's most iconic parks. Camila Bernal, NBC News.
And in Thailand tonight, a deadly fire erupting at a pub in Bangkok with dramatic images showing the flames shooting out the door. Sky News' Cordelia Lynch is on the scene.
Well, this is the bar in northern Bangkok where the devastating fire broke out. The air is still thick with smoke, and you can see the blackened walls of the entrance. The venue was packed with people at around midnight on Sunday night when suddenly there were these huge flames that ripped through it. Now, we've been told that many people tried to escape to the fire exit round the back, but sadly suffocated in the restrooms. We don't yet know the cause of this, but one person described smoke coming out of a circuit breaker, an explosion, and then the flames, many people running for their lives. And we know now 27 people have died and 22, Hallie, are critically injured.
Cordelia Lynch from Sky News, thank you. To Mississippi now, and the growing demand for answers from the devastated family of an 18-year-old found dead after a boating trip with friends. Here's Priscilla Thompson.
Courage, and don't allow Nolan Wells' name to be forgotten.
In the streets of Mississippi, demands for transparency and truth.
We just want to know what happened to Nolan.
in the death of 18-year-old Nolan Wells, who disappeared after a 4th of July boat trip with friends.
Police report her 18-year-old son, Nolan Wells, missing backseat at 3 Awkward Island.
His body was recovered 2 days later. Investigators say he may have drowned. But his parents question why his phone was found with a friend and why he didn't leave the island with the group he arrived with.
You can give all the excuses you want, but you do not leave someone else's child.
Now the family's attorney and investigators are trying to piece together what happened, asking people who were on the island to share any videos like this one from that day.
There's basically a black hole between about 4:30 on the 4th of July in the afternoon until when Nolan was found.
Brian Trasher with the Cajun Navy helped search for Nolan.
Given all the people who were out there, does a drowning that no one witnessed surprise you or seem strange to you?
It does seem strange to me. It is possible that nobody saw him.
Nolan's family says he was the only black person in the group and have questioned whether race may have played a role. Tonight, his family is awaiting the results of an independent autopsy in their search for answers.
We love him, and we know he's with God.
Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, Houston.
Still ahead for us tonight, the race to find the source of the parasite outbreak in more than half the country, making thousands of people sick. We are back with that growing parasite outbreak, making thousands sick in dozens of states, and the race to pinpoint the cause to prevent others from getting it. Here's Erica Edwards.
The search is on to find the source of a bug sending thousands of people running to the bathroom.
The cramping, the stomach pain, feels like someone is squeezing your insides.
Outbreaks of cyclosporiasis, a foodborne illness that causes intense diarrhea, now surpassing 3,000 cases, according to an NBC News analysis of state health department data. The illness caused by a tiny parasite that can cling to fresh produce. But so far, no specific food has been identified as the source. Michigan is the epicenter, with almost 2,000 lab-confirmed cases. What should people be doing? Should they stop eating fruits and vegetables?
Absolutely not. The safest way to protect yourself against cyclosporiasis is to wash it, peel it, and cook it.
31 states have reported cases, nearly 400 in New York, mostly clustered in New York City. Health officials there also dealing with an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. 56 people sickened so far with the bacterial pneumonia that occurs when people breathe in tiny droplets of water contaminated with Legionella bacteria. Cooling towers in 31 buildings in the city's Upper East Side have tested positive for the bacteria, including the famed Guggenheim Museum, which says it took immediate steps for remediation. Officials still can't say for sure which of those buildings are causing the illnesses, but all have reportedly been disinfected. As investigations into both outbreaks continue, experts say getting tested is key. Antibiotics can treat both Legionnaire's disease and cyclosporiasis. Erica Edwards, NBC News.
We are back in a moment with the incredible cliffside rescue, how one crew saved a dog days after it went over the edge. Plus, Sinner the winner, the world #1, battling back to defend his title at Wimbledon today. Next. Welcome back. In France, a brutal heat wave is now forcing top tourist sites to close early today. The Eiffel Tower and the Louvre cut their hours as temperatures peaked in the triple digits. The iconic Tour de France also had to shorten one of its cycling routes. This is the third major heat wave to hit Europe just since May. And at Wimbledon, Italian Yannick Sinner reigns supreme again. The world #1, winning the championship for a second straight year to capture his 5th Grand Slam title. He now becomes the first Italian man in history to win 100 matches at Grand Slam tournaments. Here at home, a remarkable reunion caught on camera. Look at this. Days after this stranded dog fell over a 65-foot cliff, a search team in Kentucky managed to get to him with ropes, pulled him right up to the top, and look at this. He ran right over to his very grateful owner. When we come back, there is good news tonight about a little boy's hard work making World Cup dreams come true. There is good news tonight about working hard for the love of the beautiful game.
They say money can't buy happiness, but in this moment,
It sure seems like it did for 10-year-old Valentino Sanabria Serna, a soccer superfan who's been playing since age 2.
I always saw those fans in the stadium, and I wanted to be part of that atmosphere.
When he watched the last World Cup, he set his own goal to get there himself in 2026.
He's like, I'm going to start waking up early to make my bed, and I'm going to help take out the trash and do the dishes. I was like, okay, well, if you do all those chores, you'll get paid. And if you have enough money, then you can go.
So little by little, at a rate of $2 a day,
$2, 2022.
Valentino worked and saved to turn his dream into a reality. Buying tickets for him and his mom to watch his favorite team in Miami.
She does everything for me, so it was good that I could do something for her.
Sometimes it's even better when they get those things for themselves with their own hard work. It's just so much more rewarding.
Valentino's hoping to do the same for the next World Cup and maybe someday play in one. Having learned, after all, hard work pays off.
I think that even your age, nothing's impossible. And I think that if you put your mind to it, you can do it.
You sure can. That is Nightly News for this Sunday. I'm Hallie Jackson. For all of us here at NBC, thanks so much for watching and have a great week.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.